President George H.W. Bush passes away, Russiagate continues to unfold, and Paris bursts into flame. We'll get into all of it. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Oh, man, so much to get to. A lot happened over the weekend in Russiagate, and, of course, President George H.W. Bush passes away, and this leads the media to discover that honor did exist in the Republican Party at one time, but no longer does. We'll get into all of that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about how you're going to send your mail this Christmas or this Hanukkah. With the holidays, this means that you're going to be spending a lot on postage, and that also means they're going to be schlepping a lot of boxes down to the post office. Well, why do all of that when you can get all of the great services of the post office directly from your desk over at Stamps.com. Stamps.com brings all those great services right to your desktop. Buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, any class of mail using your own computer and printer, and then the mail carrier just picks it up. No trips to the post office required. It could not be easier. Print postage any day, anytime, because Stamps.com is always open. You're not restricted to post office hours. They not only save you time, they save you money. Stamps.com helps you print the right amount of postage every time, so you're not overpaying. And with Stamps.com, you also get discounts that you can't get even at the post office. Stamps.com is a great gift to give yourself this holiday season. I use Stamps.com here at the Daily Wire offices. I use it at home as well. And right now, you can enjoy that Stamps.com service with a special offer. Special offer, 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale without long-term commitments. Go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, type in promo code Shapiro. That is Stamps.com. Enter promo code Shapiro. Go check it out right now. Stamps.com, promo code Shapiro for that special deal. All right, over the weekend, President George H.W. Bush, Bush 41 as they call him, passed away at the age of 94. H.W. was, in fact, an American hero. His entire life was dedicated to American public service. According to the Associated Press, the public viewing for President George H.W. Bush will kick off 4 days of events that will include a state funeral at Washington's National Cathedral on Wednesday and a private service at President Bush's longtime church in Houston on Thursday. His body is supposed to arrive in Washington today for public viewing in the Capitol Rotunda, which is a rare honor that is only bestowed on a few. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell called him a perfect American for how he served his country in so many capacities. He died at his Houston home at age 94 over the weekend. His crowning achievement as president was assembling the international military coalition, according to the Associated Press, that liberated Kuwait from invading Iraq in 1991 in a war that lasted just 100 hours at the time. He was ripped up and down for not invading Iraq directly and going after Saddam Hussein. He said that was beyond the mission, and obviously later events seem to have justified that to at least a certain extent. He was a humble hero of World War II. He was just 20 when he survived being shot down during a bombing run over Japan. He enlisted in the Navy on his 18th birthday. He, in fact, forewent his actual Yale scholarship to instead go into the Navy. He was shot down while he was in the Navy. In fact, they have tape that was played during the 1992 and 1988 presidential runs that showed him actually being dragged out of the ocean by fellow members of the Navy. He's the youngest Navy pilot in America at the time. He was dragged out of the water. Here's some of that footage. Here's what it looked like.
On September 2nd, 1944, USS Finback rescued Lieutenant Junior Grade George H.W. Bush, who was shot down while attacking Chichijima. During this time, Bush was attached to USS San Jacinto while serving with Torpedo Squadron 51. Bush later becomes the 41st President of the United States.
Okay, well, it was interesting because Michael Dukakis' campaign manager said in 1988 that the moment that they saw that footage on television, they knew that Michael Dukakis was never going to be president because, again, the footage is pretty heroic. Shortly after he left the service, he married his 19-year-old sweetheart, Barbara Pierce, in a union that lasted until her death earlier this year. He turned his attention to politics in the 1960s. He was elected to his first 2 terms in Congress in 1967. He then went on to serve as ambassador to the UN and China, head of the CIA, chairman of the Republican National Committee, before he was elected to 2 terms as vice president of the United States. And then, of course, he served 1 term as president of the United States before being defeated by Bill Clinton in 1992 in a hotly contested election that saw Ross Perot win 19% of the popular vote. Now, what's been fascinating to watch in the aftermath of George H.W. Bush's death is the sort of sepia glow that has been cast on George H.W. Bush by all of his political opponents. We saw the same thing happen to Senator John McCain after McCain's death earlier this year. Suddenly, all the people who spent their careers talking about how John McCain was a warmonger were saying that he was just the great example of American statesmanship. We saw the same thing with George H.W. Bush immediately after his death this weekend. Suddenly, he was a great American statesman. Suddenly, he was a wonderful man. Suddenly, he was just an example of the kind of person who could unify the country. We saw this with Mitt Romney after he lost in 2012. he gave a concession speech, and suddenly the left was like, wow, look at that. That guy's great. Where was that guy during the campaign? And many of us were saying, well, he was there the whole time. You were just forcibly ignoring the fact that Mitt Romney was a good man so that you could slander him and attack him so he wouldn't become president. It was the same thing with George H.W. Bush, who in 1991 was ripped by the left as a warmonger, who was ripped by the left as an incompetent, who was ripped by the left as cold, aloof, not in touch with the American people, a racist in 1988 for running the Willie Horton ad, right? He didn't even run it. It was a super PAC kind of quasi-associated with his campaign that ran the Willie Horton ad. But who was George H.W. Bush as a man? I think that the best clip that shows who he was as a man, this comes circa 1979. So in 1979, George H.W. Bush, who's coming off running the CIA, he ran for president in 1979. And he ran against Ronald Reagan. He ran against Bob Dole. All these people would go on to become presidential candidates in their own right. And he was asked specifically about whether he was tough enough to be president, which is an amazing question to ask a guy who volunteered for the Navy and then was shot down, going on to complete his mission, by the way. Here is George H.W. Bush being asked about his toughness circa 1979.
I don't equate toughness with just attacking some individual. I equate toughness with moral fiber, with character, with principle, with demonstrated leadership in tough jobs where you emerge, not bullying somebody, but with the respect of the people you led. That's toughness. That's fiber. That's character. I've got it, and if I happen to be decent in the process, that should not be a liability.
Okay, and then he was asked specifically about his political opponents in that clip. He's asked about Bob Dole. He says, is Bob Dole too aloof? And he says, no. He says, is Ronald Reagan too old? He says, no. And then he specifically refuses to attack his other political opponents on the stage. And that was fairly common for George H.W. Bush. Now, look, as a very conservative Republican, was I the biggest fan of George H.W. Bush's presidency? I mean, to be frank, I wasn't there for most of it, at least into politics. I was 4 years old when he took office, and I was 8 when he left. So, but in retrospect, do I look back at his presidency and say that was a shining example of what an American presidency should be? No, I have severe policy differences with George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush did not keep his promise not to raise taxes. George H.W. Bush sold AWACS to the Saudis. George H.W. Bush, on foreign policy, I am not with the common consensus that in 1991 he shouldn't have gone and deposed Saddam Hussein at the time. It would have certainly saved America a lot of trouble in the long run if he had done so. But with all of that said, was George H.W. Bush a deeply honorable human being? There's no question he was a deeply honorable human being. He was a good man. This is a good man with a good wife and a good family. And we're seeing the same thing happen to George W. Bush in the aftermath of his presidency. Suddenly, a guy they were attacking as Bush Hitler is now being recast as a man who wanted Americans to get along, a totem of a kinder, gentler era. And this is exactly what you're seeing folks on the left say about George H.W. Bush. Juan Williams says, the transformation of H.W. Bush into the party of Donald Trump demonstrates that there was a kinder, gentler time in America.
The way I think of it, Chris, is sort of optimism versus pessimism. Mourning in America, a kinder, gentler America versus American carnage as a message coming from the leader to the American people. So when I think of President Bush, I think of someone who crossed the aisle. I was really taken by what Carl just said about his best friend being a Democrat and while he served those 2 terms in Congress. And of course, he followed Reagan's pronouncement, 11th commandment, speak no evil of another Republican.
So I'm not a huge fan of George H.W. Bush's bipartisanship while he was in office and while he was president of the United States. But I'm getting rather tired of a bunch of folks on the left who would have ripped George H.W. Bush while he was president, now turning around saying it was a kinder, gentler America. No, it wasn't. It's just that you like every Republican once that Republican is no longer in office, and you specifically use those Republicans as clubs to hit the current Republican. Let's be frank about this. When Senator John McCain died, there were all these tributes that came in from the left. People who had called him a warmonger and said that John McCain was the guy who was joking about bomb Iran. Right? They were doing this whole routine while he was alive. He dies, and suddenly the man is just a semblance of a time gone by. And now it's the same thing with George H.W. Bush. Are you sensing a sort of pattern here? A pattern from the left that because Donald Trump is president, every Republican who is not Donald Trump is now seen in a kinder, gentler light. And the fact is, the reason the press are paying this sort of attention to George H.W. Bush is not because they've suddenly been struck by the honor and decency of the man George H.W. Bush. It is also because of the fact that so many folks on the left want to see George H.W. Bush contrasted unkindly with Donald Trump. And I'm not going to pretend that in terms of character, Donald Trump and George H.W. Bush are on the same plane. I don't think they're on the same plane. I don't think that George H.W. Bush is the kind of man that Donald Trump is, nor do I think Donald Trump is the same kind of man as George W. Bush. They're very different human beings. George H.W. Bush was a man who volunteered to serve in the military. Donald Trump is a man who did not. And not only that, used a number of excuses to get out of the draft. George H.W. Bush is the kind of man who devoted his life to public service. Donald Trump is the kind of man who has devoted his life to business and fame. None of that is specifically a rip on Donald Trump, but the contrast is not kind to Donald Trump between George H.W. Bush and Trump, which is, of course, exactly why the press is making that contrast in the first place. Don't trust the press when suddenly they start telling you that a Republican is wonderful. Because the only Republicans that the left thinks are wonderful are ones who are out of office or dead. I mean, that's the basic rule of thumb here. And every so often, they sort of let the mask slip. Franklin Foer let the mask slip over at The Atlantic when he suggested that George H.W. Bush was not a man of courage, right? He actually did not. Here's how he concluded his eulogy of George H.W. Bush. And this is a rare example of honesty from the left on how they actually felt about George H.W. Bush while he was alive. Here's what Franklin Foer, who's disgusting, said over at The Atlantic. Obituaries present George H.W. Bush as the last of the Republican moderates. In reality, he was an archetypal representative of the modern party, a man whose sense of duty failed him when it came to resisting the rise of racially revanchist libertarian forces. He embodied an establishment that wrote a very nice thank you notes, but good manners are hardly the same as moral courage. Prudence is sometimes called hard-hearted. Those who are mourning the passing of the old establishment should mourn its many failures too. That's how the left really felt about George H.W. Bush. And don't let them put on the mask of mourning in order to pretend that George H.W. Bush was something different for them than Donald Trump. You and I, we can see the differences between George H.W. Bush and Donald Trump, which were many and myriad, some in favor of Bush in terms of character, some not in favor of Bush, maybe in terms of policy. But for the left, the only reason that they are now donning the mask of mourning when it comes to George H.W. Bush is so that they can attempt to proclaim that Donald Trump is significantly worse by any sort of comparison. Hey, in just a second, I want to talk to you about George H.W. Bush's final words. I mean, whenever a man of honor dies, it's a loss, obviously, to the country. And the stories of his death are pretty moving. I'm going to talk about that in just 1 second. But first, let's talk about what's going to hit you when you unwrap a brand new phone this Christmas. Okay? That brand new monthly bill that's going to come along with it. It's not going to be great. Big wireless providers can seriously suck the joy out of the holidays. So this year, don't just upgrade your phone, upgrade your wireless provider and switch to Mint Mobile. For a limited time, Mint Mobile is offering the best holiday deal in wireless that you have ever seen. 3 months of service for only $20, which is unbelievable. 3 months of cell service for just $20. Mint Mobile's holiday deal is only here for a limited time, $20 total. It gets you 3 months of wireless service with 5 gigs of 4G LTE data each month, plus unlimited talk and text. Not going to get a better deal than this. Use your own phone along with any Mint Mobile plan. You can keep your old phone number along with all your existing contacts. Mint Mobile runs on the nation's fastest, most advanced LTE network. If you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee, so you really have nothing to lose. Ditch that old wireless bill. Start saving with Mint Mobile. No reason to rack up charges this Christmas or Hanukkah. Instead, why don't you go get Mint Mobile and you can get that great new phone, and also you won't have to pay through the nose. Take advantage of that Mint Mobile holiday deal before it's gone. Get 3 months of wireless for $20. Get the plan shipped to your door for free by going to mintmobile.com/Ben. That is mintmobile.com/Ben. Again, 3 months of service for just $20 at mintmobile.com/Ben, mintmobile.com/Ben. Go check it out right now. All right, so the stories of President Bush's death are really moving. I mean, this is a man with, it's hard to imagine a better American family. A son who was a governor, another son who was president of the United States and governor of Texas, a family in third generation of politics. Pretty amazing stuff. Again, as I emphasize, I think that it is fair for people on the right to talk about the goodness of George H.W. Bush if they didn't spend their careers attacking him as a bad man. People like Franklin Foer over at The Atlantic, I think, are more reflective of what the left really thinks about George H.W. Bush. Again, Franklin Foer ripping into George H.W. Bush, saying he didn't have any moral courage. When's the last time Franklin Foer signed up for the military in the middle of World War II? It's just amazing. Just quick final note from Franklin Foer before we get to the last words of George H.W. Bush. Franklin Foer writes, one of the great counterfactuals of American history is pondering what would have happened if George Bush had exerted greater control over the destiny of the Republican Party. What if the moderate Republicans of the late 50s and early 60s had aggressively owned the civil rights agenda and rendered the cause of racial justice a bipartisan concern? By the way, they did. More Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act as a percentage than Democrats did. If the old money Republicans could have mustered that leadership, stood firm against the flow of segregationists into their club, It might have precluded the invention of Richard Nixon's Southern strategy and the generations of racialized politics that followed. Does anyone really believe, by the way, that this was all about George H.W. Bush failing to stem the flow of racists into the Republican Party? But this is how the left really thinks about all of these folks. Right? This is how the left really thinks about all these. In any case, James Baker, who was George H.W. Bush's lifelong friend and Secretary of State, he was on CNN, which actually their coverage of H.W. was excellent. And James Baker was talking to Jake Tapper about H.W.'s final words.
They got the kids on the phone, and each one of them spoke to him, and he spoke back or mumbled back anyway. And then they got 43 on the phone, and 43 said, "I love you, Dad, and I just want to, and I'll see you in heaven." And 41 said, "I love you too." And those were the last words that he ever spoke.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. You can't ask for more from a life than that. It is amazing when somebody gets to live the life that they sought to live, even when they pass away. It's obviously a credit to them as a human being. If you can live your entire life and die saying, "I love you" to your children, it doesn't get a lot better than that, especially when your child happens to also have been president of the United States. Pretty amazing stuff. All right. Meanwhile, Russiagate continues, and the left is fully invested in Russiagate, that this is what's going to take down President Trump. You can see the excitement from so many folks on the left. Now, again, the evidence is not in that President Trump actively colluded with the Russians to steal the 2016 election or anything like that. And so the left is now shifting their argument. They've shifted their argument several times. The first was that the Trump campaign had been compromised by the Russians, that the Russians basically had compromat, you remember, on President Trump, and they were going to use that compromat in order to affect his role in office. That has not been proved. There is no evidence of that. Then they shifted the argument to President Trump was coordinating with the Russians to hack Hillary Clinton's emails and the DNC, and then to militarize the release of those emails to win the election. Again, that has not been proved either. Then it turned into President Trump maybe received some of those emails, and they point out connections between Roger Stone and other members of the sort of Trump coterie. And that has not been proved yet either. So now it's moved to President Trump had business relationships in Russia at the same time that he was running for president. And that's true. But that's also not criminal. As even Andrea Mitchell over at MSNBC was recognizing, she says, President Trump is saying it's not illegal for him to do business in Russia. That, of course, is exactly true.
The president is correct. It's not illegal for an international businessman to be doing the business. The conflicts of interest are profound. It's not illegal yet.
And she is right about this. Jake Tapper made this point last week also. That's not stopping Democrats from now trying to say that because Trump had business contacts in Russia, that means that he was in some way compromised. So Adam Schiff, the representative from California who has his pup tent set up outside the media headquarters. I mean, again, it's amazing. He's actually brought an electric generator. He's dug a pit for the outhouse. And the guy's he's starting to hook up the plumbing, but he hasn't actually connected it to the main line yet, right outside these headquarters. He was on ABC's This Week talking, again, about Michael Cohen and Russiagate and President Trump.
What Michael Cohen was saying and others were saying about when this business deal ended was not true. And what's more, the Russians knew it wasn't true. That at the same time that Donald Trump was the presumptive nominee of the GOP and arguing in favor of doing away with sanctions, he was working on a deal that would require doing away with sanctions for him to make money in Russia. That is a real problem. It means that the compromise is far broader than we thought.
There we go. So it's compromise. So we're back to the original theory, except again, the theory is not supported by any evidence. Donna Brazile, former head of the DNC, she was saying the same thing, that Michael Cohen pleading guilty to lying to the FBI, that this is, in fact, a smoking gun. It is not a smoking gun of anything other than Michael Cohen lied to the FBI, because he lies to a lot of people, Michael Cohen.
Michael Cohen once boasted that he would take a bullet for Donald Trump, but instead this week he delivered a smoking gun. The fact that, that's a smoking gun, because once again he said that what I provided before was consistent with what the president wanted me to say because I wanted to stay loyal to the president. Smoking gun, saying he said essentially that the White House, the president was lying at the time that he had no business dealing with Russia when he was looking to strike a deal with Russia.
Okay, the president has not testified. The president, did say that he had no business ties with Russia. Again, it's going to come down to what is the meaning of is, right? The president's going to say, I didn't have business ties with Russia, right? We were in negotiations. It didn't happen. So that's not me lying. People on the left are going to say, well, you were implying that there were no, at any time, business ties with Russia, and there were. In any case, none of that is criminal, as Andrea Mitchell says. And this is leading a lot of folks on the right to more and more rip into the Mueller report. Rudy Giuliani, the president's attorney on these matters, he says that Robert Mueller is acting unethically, that basically he's culling together a bunch of people he says have lied to him, but there's been no underlying crime. So at no point has anybody been actually convicted or pled guilty to collusion with Russia regarding the election, which was the original charge. Instead, everybody's being gotten on ancillary crimes of lying to the FBI about matters that really have nothing to do with the central contention. That's what Giuliani is saying, and he's not wrong.
I think the special prosecutor has stepped over the line now with the way he's intimidating people in order to tell what he believes is his version of the truth. This is what's wrong with these special prosecutors and independent counsels. They think they're God. I mean, they think they know the only truth that exists, even if there's a lot of doubt about it. They seem to want to people at any cost, including the cost of ethical behavior or the rights of people.
Okay, so Rudy Giuliani obviously quite upset about all this. So is President Trump. President Trump tweeted out this morning a series of tweets. Says, Michael Cohen asked judge for no prison time. You mean he can do all the terrible, unrelated to Trump things having to do with fraud, big loans, taxis, etc., and not serve a long prison term? He makes up stories to get a great and already reduced deal for himself and get his wife and father-in-law, who has the money, off scot-free. I do like that he spelled scot-free, capital S-C-O-T-T. Free. So there's a dude named Scott Free. He lied for this outcome and should, in my opinion, serve a full and complete sentence. I will never testify against Trump. This statement was recently made by Roger Stone, essentially stating he will not be forced by a rogue and out-of-control prosecutor to make up lies and stories about President Trump. Nice to know that some people still have, quote-unquote, guts. Bob Mueller, who's a much different man than people think, and his out-of-control band of angry Democrats don't want the truth. They only want lies. The truth is very bad for their mission. Okay, so in a second, I'm going to say why I think that President Trump's sort of half right and why he's sort of half wrong. But first, let's talk about how you can make your business better. Well, the way that you can make your business better is by having better employees. Let's face it. Half the people who work for you, schlubs. You need to replace them with people who are not schlubs. And this means you need to go over to ZipRecruiter.com right now. Hiring can be pretty time-consuming. You post a job to several online job boards, and then you get tons of the wrong resumes. Then you have to sort through all the resumes to find a few people with the right skills and experience. Job sites that overwhelm you with the wrong resumes, those are not smart. So instead, do the smart thing. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter finds qualified candidates for you. Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes to identify people with the right skills, education, and experience, and actively invites them to apply to your job. So you get qualified candidates fast. It is no wonder that ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the United States. This rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 reviews. Right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. If you love the show, show your support of it and ZipRecruiter by going to ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. We use it here at the Daily Wire. ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. No reason for you to suffer with a bad business. Check it out right now, ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. So President Trump obviously upset with the Mueller investigation. Why? Because the theory is that Mueller is basically getting a bunch of people to cop to things that are not major crimes in order to get them to flip on the president and say things that are untrue. Now, a couple of things can be true at once. One can be that there is no underlying crime here. Two can be that the Mueller report is actually just a report and not a criminal indictment. That it turns out that what Mueller is actually attempting to do is compile a bunch of mean stuff about Trump without any sort of criminal indictment in the offing. And thing number three can also be true, which is that Mueller, in order to get that information, is going after people for relatively minor crimes. Lying to the FBI is not a minor crime, but about issues that are not exactly criminal is not exactly a major crime either. The person making this case is, of course, Andrew McCarthy over at National Review. And it is important to note before we start into McCarthy's case that that Mueller is not allowed to suborn perjury himself. So if Mueller were to get Cohen to lie about Trump, if he knew that Cohen were lying about something, and he said, listen, I'm going to prosecute you and put you in jail unless you lie about Trump, that is in and of itself a crime. So Mueller is not doing that. But it is also true that it is possible Cohen is going to testify about a lot of stuff that's not actually criminal. It just makes Trump look bad. And that's McCarthy's take on all of this. He says, no prosecutor builds a case the way Mueller is going about it. What prosecutor says, here's our witness lineup: Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, Alex van der Zwaan, Rick Gates, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen. And what is it they have in common, ladies and gentlemen? Bingo, they're all convicted liars. For a prosecutor, like any trial lawyer, what the jury thinks is at least as important as what the law says. If the most memorable thing the jury takes into the deliberation room is that no one should believe a word your witnesses say, you're not going to convict the lowliest grifter, much less the president of the United States. Instead, what you have to do is build your case by having your cooperating accomplice witnesses plead guilty to the big scheme you're trying to pin on the main culprit. They say there was a big thing Trump was trying to do. I was a part of it. Now I'm testifying about it. But no one's actually testifying to any of that stuff. He says, in short, you build a case by first establishing the foundational criminal offense. Juries do not convict people because they like or trust the prosecution's witnesses. They convict because they are persuaded that justice demands redress for a real crime. Note that word, crime. But there is no crime here. That is why from the beginning of the Trump-Russia investigation, and certainly since Mueller's appointment on May 17, 2017, we have stressed that the probe is a counterintelligence investigation, not a criminal investigation. Mueller does not have a crime he is investigating. He is investigating in hopes of finding a crime, which is a day and night different thing. So here's what McCarthy concludes, I think correctly. He says, that brings us to the where there's smoke, there must be fire talking point Mueller fans have been trying out. If all these people are lying to cover up something, that something must involve some egregious criminality. That's ridiculous. We know from our own daily lives that crimes account for only a very small percentage of the things people lie about. Indeed, throughout the 1990s, Democrats insisted that prosecutors should leave Bill Clinton alone because everybody lies about sex. People lie about things they are embarrassed or ashamed of. Politics is a seamy business, but politics is not a crime. Consequently, if you criminalize politics, if you turn a prosecutor loose to investigate political campaign activities, you're apt to find unsavory conduct that is not criminal, but that some people will lie about. So why exactly is Mueller turning lies into guilty pleas? First, he's not going to indict the president, so Mueller is not worried about the lack of credibility of these witnesses. Second, he knows the media is going to cheer everything that he does. The media reports Mueller is investigating the Trump-Russia collusion. Dozens of people have been charged or convicted, but they will not report that no one has been charged, much less convicted, of any crime involving collusion between Trump and Russia. And third, defendants convicted of making false statements are useful because Mueller is writing a report, not preparing for a jury trial. Convicted liars never get cross-examined in a report, nor do they give the bumpy, inconsistent testimony you hear in a courtroom. So Mueller is just putting together a report. He's not actually putting together a criminal indictment, and that means that he is cobbling together all of these various guilty pleas on lies that have nothing to do with the main topic to get these people to spill the beans about a non-criminal scheme that embarrasses Trump. And that's Trump's main case here. And that's the case you're going to see Trump's legal team make. None of this is impeachable. Some of it may be embarrassing. But what is Robert Mueller doing here? And Robert Mueller's case is going to be, listen, when people lie to the FBI, that's a crime. And it is my job to prosecute people who commit crimes. This means that the real danger that President Trump is in, legally speaking, is of suborning perjury. If Trump told Michael Cohen or anybody else that they ought to lie to the FBI, that would be the only criminality that I think Mueller is going to uncover here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is an underlying crime. And after all this time, after 2 years, Mueller comes forward with the big reveal. And the big reveal is that Trump and Putin were in the back room hacking Hillary Clinton's emails together like Matthew Broderick in War Games. Maybe that's what was happening. But absent that big reveal, all that's happening here is Trump is turning all the people around Trump into criminals in order to get them to testify to material that is non-criminal but very damaging to President Trump going into 2020. And that's why Team Trump is so upset. And that's why President Trump is so upset. And I think at least part of that seems to be justified. Now, I'm going to wait until the Mueller report comes out to say whether I think that this is terrible or dishonest. And again, two things can be true at once. One, Mueller can be honest. Mueller can be doing his job. And that job had no boundaries from the outset. And that lack of boundaries has led a special prosecutor to do what special prosecutors always do, which is find ancillary crime. Again, Bill Clinton was not impeached for committing an underlying crime. He was not impeached for committing sexual assault against Paula Jones. He was impeached for committing perjury. He was impeached because he suborned perjury. President Trump could get caught in the same trap here simply by dint of the underlying crime. So we'll see how all of this plays out. Now, meanwhile, we'd be remiss if we did not talk about the situation in France, because right now France is basically on fire. The footage from France is absolutely astonishing. Here is some footage of the police firing rubber bullets into crowds over by the Arc de Triomphe. I mean, people marching down the center of Paris, and the police, who you will see in black here behind the barricades, firing rubber bullets into the crowd of people who are wearing yellow. It's pretty amazing stuff. And so, full-scale rioting in the streets of France. And you can see, it's legitimately like a pitched street battle. People throwing rocks at each other, the police officers who are ducking behind their shields and then firing rubber bullets into the crowd. The destruction is pretty astonishing as well. We have some of the pictures of the destruction. Here's what some of the destruction looks like. Not just the smoke in the streets, people burning cars in the streets, people being water hosed in the streets. Pretty amazing. People who are graffitiing all over the historic sites in France. People broke into the museum gift shop over at the Louvre, I believe. People overturning stuff in the streets. People destroying some of the historic artifacts and statues from the First French Republic in the Arc de Triomphe. Pretty incredible stuff. So what are all of these riots about? It turns out that reality has its day. Reality suggests that people are going to riot when they feel economically dispossessed. And they feel economically dispossessed when you decide to tax them extraordinary amounts of money to pay for your global warming agenda. That's really what's happening in France right now. I'm going to talk more about that in just 1 second. But first, it's uncomfortable in France, but you don't have to be comfortable down below. That's why you need the best underwear on the market. Dudes, this holiday season, as you rack your brain for the perfect gift, I have some tips for treating yourself and everyone else on your list to mind-blowing comfort. It's Tommy John, the revolutionary clothing company that is redefining comfort. Tommy John has the most comfortable underwear for everyone on the planet. You can count on their products to be snug and neat and to stay in one place. All of their underwear sports a no-edgy guarantee. Comfortable stay-put waistbands, a range of fabrics that are luxuriously soft, feather-light, moisture-wicking, breathable, designed to move with you, not against you. That means no bunching, no rolling, no riding up. So if you're still on the fence, wondering if Tommy John would be a memorable gift, just think of the fact that you're not going to have to be picking that wedgie or watching any of your friends do the same. And with limited edition holiday gifts and daily deals, there's something for everyone on your list, naughty or nice. Give the gift of mind-blowing comfort this holiday season with limited edition holiday gifts from Tommy John. Save 20% on your first order at TommyJohn.com/Ben. That's TommyJohn.com/Ben. Again, these underwear really are terrific. I'm wearing them right now. And let me say, my level of comfort, extraordinary. So good, so good. And also, whenever you throw Tommy John in the wash, you get cheaper pairs of underwear. And throw them in the wash, they come out and the elastic is shot and they're now sagging on you. That's not the deal with Tommy John. These things fit like a glove the first time, and they fit like a glove after you've thrown them in the wash a bunch of times. Durable, excellent, and they sport a no-edgy guarantee, which, as I say, would have helped me a lot in high school. TommyJohn.com/Ben for 20% off. TommyJohn.com/Ben. Go check it out right now. Also, before we go any further, and I have a lot more to get to on today's show, trade policy, and the New York Times ripping on Hanukkah, because what would a day be in the New York Times without a bit of anti-Semitism or self-hating Jewry? We'll get to all that in just a second. But first, you have to go over to dailywire.com and subscribe. Tonight, if you're a subscriber, you will particularly enjoy our next episode of Daily Wire Backstage, Holiday Edition. That's right, I'm sacrificing my evening once again to be here with you. So if you're not here, I will take it as a sign of personal ingratitude. Daily Wire God King Jeremy Boring, me, Andrew Klavan, the awful Michael Knowles, and Alicia Krause will be here to talk holidays, politics and culture, and of course, answer your questions. As always, only Daily Wire subscribers get to ask the questions, so make sure to subscribe today. Coming up in 2019, I have to announce this, the Ben Shapiro radio show will be extended to 3 hours. This is what you get when you subscribe. The Ben Shapiro radio show is adding 2 full hours per day. So you got my podcast. You already get that. And if you're a subscriber, you get that live all the way through. But we have 2 more hours per day with all the great content you've come to enjoy. Unless you listen live on radio, the only way that you're going to be able to actually see all of that is to subscribe, because then you can watch it on demand. You can watch the full 3-hour show. So make sure to sign up for your subscription today. That's a hell of a pitch. If you're going to sign up for the holidays, I am now expending 3 times the effort to make sure that you enjoy your subscription. It's going to be amazing. Okay, $9.99 a month gets you that. Also, for $99 a year, you get this, the very greatest in beverage vessels. So you get all of that. You can sit there in the comfort of your own home as I sweat bullets trying to bring you the best in content 3 hours a day, sipping from this, the Leftist Tears hot or cold tumbler, enjoying your life to the fullest extent possible. You will love it. You will live it. It's spectacular. And you get all of those things for $99 a year, which is a solid deal. I mean, come on. It's not going to get better than that. Also, you get to be part of our mailbag. We have all sorts of new benefits coming behind the paywall that we are working on as I speak. I'm working on them in my head right now. So you get to go check that out right now. Also, check us out on YouTube or iTunes. We had a great Sunday special this week with Pastor John MacArthur. We have big Sunday specials coming up in the near future with a lot of very famous and great thinkers, as we do every Sunday. You get access to all of these things. Go subscribe at YouTube or iTunes. And when you do, then you get the rest of the show as well. It comes into your mailbox, all the good stuff. Go check it out. Leave us a review. We always appreciate it. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.